And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth, a great day to recognize that in one capacity at least, the demonstrators in Ferguson, Missouri and around the country are right. The Ferguson situation is an illustration of a deeper, larger, nationwide problem. What is the problem? Racism, the war on black men, anything like that? No, the problem is moral relativism, which is making our nation sick. And you see it on every single issue, yes, including the issue on immigration, where revealing off-the-cuff comments by the President of the United States make the case that action is necessary by Congress. On this Ferguson issue, it is astonishing to me that people still want to talk about it, especially with the interview that Darren Wilson gave, where he seemed to me entirely credible. Did anybody watch that and think, oh, no, this guy's lying, he's making it up? What do you believe was Darren Wilson's real message? What was his real motivation in doing what he did? Did he wake up in the morning to say that, I'm going to go out and try to hunt down some poor innocent black guy to shoot? Why, if that was his motivation, had he never done that before? He'd been a police officer for a pretty long time. Look, it's almost unfair to quote Michael Brown's mother, Leslie McSpadden, who appeared on CBS Morning News. She appeared on CBS Morning News, and she, of course, disbelieves everything that Officer Wilson had to say in his interview on ABC, competing network, with George Stephanopoulos. Here is the way she responded to what he had to say.
He's giving his version, and I'd like to know your reaction. He says your son threw the first punch, your son did not have his arms up, that your son was approaching him, that he was in fear of his life. Leslie, what do you say to what Officer Wilson is saying today?
I don't believe a word of it. Mm-hmm. I knew my son far too well he would never do anything like that. Mm-hmm. He would never provoke anyone to do anything to him, and he wouldn't do anything to anybody. Mm-hmm. I don't believe a word of it.
Okay, he was just a gentle giant. And then at least they ask the legitimate question, what about the footage at the that just moments before the fatal shooting, footage that shows the gentle giant, Michael Brown, St. Michael as he's become known, that shows him actually knocking over a cigar store, a convenience store, to steal a bunch of, cigarillos, and pushing a guy. Here's the question and the answer of Michael Brown's mother.
If something happened in that store, and that's a big if, that could have been dealt with. But you didn't have to do what you did. He didn't do what he had to do. He did what he wanted to do.
Okay. What he wanted to do?
Yes.
In other words, you think he wanted to kill your son?
I don't think he wanted to kill my son, but he wanted to kill someone.
And then in his statement, he said he'll do it again. So
his conscience is clear? How could your conscience be clear after killing somebody, even if it was an accidental death?
And to allow the body to lie there for 4 hours.
Okay. Again, of course, Officer Wilson had nothing to do with the treatment of the body. The reason they allowed the body to lie there was so they could gather forensic evidence. And yes, they probably left it there too long, and it showed disrespect, and I think that could have been done much, much better. But the idea that somehow Darren Wilson had it in for Michael Brown, that he wanted to kill him, he did not what he had to do, he did what he wanted to do. If you believe that that is true, if you believe, as even the New York Times is saying today in its editorial section, that this is indicative of an ongoing war on black boys, you can give us a call, 1-800-955-1776. Here's what they say. They say, for the black community of Ferguson, this is a New York Times editorial, the killing of Michael Brown was the last straw in a long train of abuses that they have suffered daily at the hands of the local police. News accounts have strongly suggested, for example, that police in St. Louis County's many municipalities systematically target poor and minority citizens for street and traffic stops. In this context, the police are justifiably seen as an alien occupying force that is synonymous with state-sponsored abuse. This is the New York Times writing this? And by the way, the county executive in St. Louis County happens to be African-American. They're all Democrats. The entire thing is run by Democrats. So it's an alien occupying force. Then it says this. The case resonated across the country in New York City, Chicago, and Oakland because the killing of young black men by police is a common feature of African American life and a source of dread for black parents from coast to coast? Is that true? Even vaguely true? Look, what is a real problem for African American life is homicide, is murder. But it's murder by other black people. Jason Riley makes that point powerfully. And yes, he is a black male. Jason Riley makes that point powerfully in the Wall Street Journal. He says, according to the FBI, homicide is the leading cause of death among young black men who are 10 times more likely than their white counterparts to be murdered. How many of those murders occur at the hands of police officers? An average of less than 100 a year. Now, that's too many. But there are more white young men who are killed by police than black young men. And for the New York Times to write this nonsense that the killing of young black men by police is a common feature of African American life? Common feature? Really? With 100 people a year? In the United States of America, we have over 40 million African Americans. And there are 100 people a year who die at the hands of police who are black. And that's become a common feature of black life? What about the 300 white kids who are killed by police officers in the course of a year? Unbelievable. And here's what the Times says. They're mind readers. This is what a rag. Honest to goodness, the editorial section of this newspaper is just beneath contempt. Here's what they say. These statistics reflect the fact that many police officers see black men as expendable figures on the urban landscape, not quite human beings. This is America's most influential newspaper. It is the most influential press source. Let me read it again. These statistics reflect the fact that many police officers see black men as expendable figures on the urban landscape, not quite human beings. Okay, if you're a police officer, why don't you fess up? If you know a police officer who sees black men as not quite human beings? This is so disgusting and absurd. And it's so wrong. Because they don't say some police officers. Okay, if you want to say, yeah, there's some police officers out there who are racist and abusive, I agree. I know that is true. But they say many, as if it's a common feature. Just as they tout this ridiculous and destructive message that the killing of young black men by police is a common feature of African American life. You know what's a common feature of African American life? Is kids escaping poverty and working hard and doing well and getting into college and becoming successful. That is a far more common feature. There are more kids. They always use the statistic. We send more black men to jail than go to college. I'll tell you one thing. I guarantee you there are more young black males enrolling in colleges, enrolling in elite colleges every year than the 100 who die at the hands of police. Guaranteed. I know that to be true. There are more than 100 black males every year who are admitted to Yale and Harvard. Okay? This is absurdity. Why don't they say that's a common feature of black life? This is a slander of the black community. It's a slander of police officers. It's a slander of America. And it stinks. And here's a question. For those people who believe that there's no excuse for what happened, that Darren Wilson is guilty, that he should be lynched or executed or imprisoned for life, here's the question for you. Let's say that Michael Brown had been successful in grabbing the gun that everybody agrees he was fighting for. What was he planning to do with it? Give it to a gun buyback program? Donate it to charity? What did he want to grab that gun for? Your answer coming up. I actually got 3 questions, and I'll put them on the table. You can take a swing at any one of the 3 or all 3, okay? Question number 1. There is no dispute that there was a struggle over Officer Wilson's gun. No dispute at all. And in fact, there is very definitive forensic evidence. The New York Times summarizes, examiners found Michael Brown's blood or other DNA outside the driver's door of the police SUV, outside the left rear passenger door, inside the driver's door, on the upper left thigh of Officer Wilson's pants, and on Officer Wilson's shirt and weapon. Okay, there was a struggle over the gun. Question number 1, what was it that Michael Brown wanted to do with the gun? He was trying to get hold of it. Did he want to just throw it away onto somebody's lawn to make sure that Officer Wilson didn't shoot him? Or, as I mentioned, did he want to keep it and use it for a gun buyback program and make the world better? Did he want to use it later to go deer hunting? Probably not the best weapon for that. What was his purpose in trying to grab Officer Wilson's gun? And even more to the case, what would Officer Wilson be reasonable in assuming about a guy who's 6'6", 290 pounds, trying to get hold of his weapon? Question number 2, what are the protests accomplishing? How are they helping the cause of justice, progress, racial understanding, or anything in America? Question number 3, let's say that the grand jury had come back with some kind of indictment, that they had indicted Officer Darren Wilson for involuntary manslaughter, or they had indicted him for murder, either first degree or second degree. They'd given some kind of indictment. How would that have made life better for people in the United States of America, particularly for African American people? Why would that have been such an important outcome and such an important difference between what has actually happened? 1-800-955-1776. Let's go to Wendell in San Bernardino, California. Wendell, you're on the Medved Show.
Hello, Michael. Thank you.
You bet.
Listen, I would like to begin this conversation by saying that in life, everything starts with attitude. And I want not only black people in America to hear that, and all the other peoples in America, that everything starts in life with attitude. Being a bully, do not get you anywhere in life. However, all of this do not change the fact that there is a dead kid in America today, again, to a lot of madness that's not necessary. It's definitely not necessary for the officer, because the officer has been trained other ways of taking people down that need to be taken down without deadly force. So excuses doesn't make the problem right.
I agree with you. Can you answer my question,
any type of
Wendell?
policy on it
Wendell?
that we might.
Wendell, can you answer my question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. What do you think Michael Brown would have done with the gun if he had succeeded in wrestling it away from Officer Wilson?
Well, if there is true and there is genuine evidence that Michael Brown was somehow struggling with the officer.
No one disagrees with
firearm.
that. No one disagrees with that. Here's the way that
I wouldn't say no one disagree with that, because one person evidence and investigation is not the same as another one, Michael. We must not try to put spin and make.
Yeah, I understand. Hold on. Please listen, Wendell. And again, let's deal with this attitude that you're talking about. This is the way the New York Times, which is very pro-Michael Brown, very anti-Darren Wilson, summarizes the forensic evidence. Examiners found Michael Brown's blood or other DNA outside the driver's door, outside the left rear passenger door, inside the driver's door, on the upper left thigh of Officer Wilson's pants, and on Officer Wilson's shirt and weapon. So there was a struggle. He discharged his weapon the first time without seriously wounding Michael Brown. He discharged that weapon during the struggle in the car, which most witnesses swore that they saw.
But this is after the fact, Michael. He wasn't shot and killed then. He was killed after the fact. Apparently, he was a distance between him and the officer, so the officer could have very well gone to.
Okay, but you're not answering my question. Why do you think it is that Michael Brown was trying to get hold of the weapon?
I can tell you one thing. For whatever the reason was, he was a fool to do it.
Exactly, and that's exactly why there was no indictment. Because if you were a police officer and someone is trying to grab your weapon from you and fighting you to try to grab your weapon, then it is absolutely reasonable to assume that the reason he's trying to grab your weapon is to pick it up, point it at your head, and kill you. That is a reasonable assumption, isn't it?
Michael, let's have a serious and truthful, genuine conversation here, okay? It doesn't change the fact. It doesn't give officers any excuses, because they have been trained, Michael. I work as a security officer myself. I have been trained to use other things on my belt as opposed to the gun. And in reality, we have to be true that the gun is used most on black kids in America today than any other country in the world.
Okay, Wendell, that is completely, it is completely not, Wendell, it is not true. Let me suggest to you that you look up the FBI statistics from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, okay? And those statistics show that the majority of shootings by police officers, the majority, are white people. 3/4 are non-black people.
Much of it done toward black kids, and I can
No, it's 1/4 of the shootings are done toward black kids. 1/4 of the fatal shootings are done toward black kids. Yes, black kids are overrepresented, but they're far, far more overrepresented when it comes to crime. Here is what doesn't compute for me at all, Wendell. And please listen to this. This is by Jason Riley, an African-American male. And he summarizes statistics. He says, according to the FBI, homicide is the leading cause of death among young black men, who are 10 times more likely than their white counterparts to be murdered. And while you'd never know it watching MSNBC, the police are not to blame. Blacks are just 13% of the population, but responsible for a majority of all murders in the U.S., and more than 90% of black murder victims are killed by other blacks. Blacks commit violent crimes at 7 to 10 times the rate that whites do. The fact that their victims tend to be of the same race suggests that young black men in the ghetto live in danger of being shot by each other, not by cops. Those are numbers with which you cannot argue.